Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. This is the third of an intermittent series of stories about therapists in the abyss. Today, my friend and colleague, Dr. Elena Estanol, shares her, as she calls it, her fourth dark night of the soul. After her very painful struggles through 3 brutal and unexpected life challenges, Elena thought she was done, that the crises were surely past, that she'd finally gained the wisdom, the positive momentum, and acceptance to handle anything life could throw her way. And then came the fourth. I have long been fascinated with how people heal. When is psychological healing primarily a solo inward journey? And when is it best catalyzed by interpersonal connections? After all, relationships are human growth machines. Yet the ending of relationships can feel like some kind of unbearable, drawn-out death. So what's the best healing path for a broken heart and spirit? Through her story, Elena and I explore the roles of both interpersonal and intrapersonal healing, the power of owning and crafting our personal narratives, and moving toward the difficult but ultimately necessary realization that the hardest stuff in life tends to hit us unexpectedly, like some kind of existential avalanche.
I was at a really good place in my life. I felt excited. I felt like I had gone through like 3, maybe more massive challenges, both personally and in my relationship and professionally. And I kind of finally felt like I was good, right? Like when you just kind of feel like, oh, I'm getting to the top. And I was feeling super excited. I felt like I had a really stable relationship. My husband and I had been married for 17 years. We had formed this beautiful integrative wellness center. I had 2 other businesses, a coaching practice. Things were going really well. And I was so excited to be writing a book about intuition. Like I had written a few other books before, but they had been collaborations. And so this was like, this is going to be my own book. So I was so excited about the prospect and just, beginning to figure out how to carve time and all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, my life fell apart. What's interesting is that the book that I was beginning to write was all about intuition and tuning into your intuition and really how doing that can really save your life. And interestingly, about a week before this happened, I started having some major anxiety. And I was having like major anxiety in my body and I couldn't figure out why. And usually when this happens, it's my body telling me something's up, like something's about to happen. Mm-hmm. But it usually happens quicker, right? So I might have some anxiety 15 minutes before a session, right? And then when my client comes in, it's like, explosion, right? And then I'm like, okay, I knew. But this was odd because it was a whole week. I was just anxious and it's unusual for me to be feeling that. And then about a week later, my husband sat me down and he said, I'm feeling really unhappy. And I'm feeling very confused, and I think that I might want to go back to North Dakota, and I think that I may want to have a family after all, which of course had been a conversation that we had had many, many times. People are like, didn't you talk about this? Of course we talked about it. It's a conversation we had had many, many times. And so, it's fascinating because, in that moment, it just, all of a sudden I understood why I was so anxious. And it was like, oh. So, of course, at that moment, it totally felt like I was at the peak. And then all of a sudden the rug was pulled from under me and felt like everything that was stable was not.
I always think of the biggest, hardest, most challenging life stuff just comes out of nowhere.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. Agreed. I don't think that I ever expected the others. And, as we were talking off air a little bit, how we worry so much about all these things that we think might happen. It's usually never those things. Mm-hmm. The wipeouts usually come out of left field where you're not looking or paying attention, which to me, that's our permission to then just be happy and then just enjoy and let go of the worry and the anxiety, because if something's going to wipe you out, it's going to be something else. So you might as well just appreciate when things are good, because you don't know when things are not going to be.
Yeah. But it seems like this is a special kind of wipeout, because it's a person. We are social, connected beings, and when your life partner, your husband says, we're done. I mean, that's a dark night like few others.
Huge. And actually, I mentioned, that I had been working on writing another book. And of course, what I did is write a book about my experience through this process. And I write a chapter on belonging and why this was so painful and so meaningful to me. It's because being a Mexican American and being an immigrant and my family not being here, I had never really had a sense of belonging, right? So this was my person. And then all of a sudden I was losing that.
That's more than a husband.
Totally.
This is your connection to America.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Which has been interesting even afterwards, right? Like, of, going to the doctor and it's like, who's your emergency contact? And I'm like, I don't know. I've had to ask friends, hey, would you be willing to be my emergency contact for this or that? Right? Because I think that for most of us, in some ways, we have our families and our families are here, and my family was supportive, but my family is in Mexico and Austria and, like all over the world. Yeah. So this was different and big in that way. Because all of a sudden it put me back into this place of I don't really belong.
Yeah. Like alone in a whole different way.
There is a particular sense of confidence and strength and resilience that you get from having gone through the fire and surviving it, It's interesting because it's been the theme of my life. Even my dissertation was about resilience. And so it's something that I am very uniquely familiar, not just, intellectually, but experientially. And so I had a divorce before. And one of the things that I learned from that experience was that if there was too much difference. So I'm somebody that's very growth oriented and always educating myself and growing and growing. And so I felt like in that first relationship, I grew too much and then the distance became too big. And so in some ways, we always try to take those lessons into the next relationship, right? And so I had sort of ensured that we were growing together. So we had done like all of this personal and professional development together, and we were learning all of these concepts and theories together, right? And incidentally, he said to me, I wouldn't be able to be making this decision right now if it wasn't for you and if we hadn't done all of the work that we had done, because I wouldn't have the confidence in myself to be able to take this huge leap of faith. And so he said something to me that was really powerful, and it took me a little bit to actually get on board in believing it, which I do now. And he said, I believe that it is the completion, the successful completion of a spiritual contract.
Wow.
And it's time for us to go our separate ways.
So the completion for him was the divorce?
Yeah. there's so much to untangle. How do you untangle 17 years of building a life and a business together, right? Like we were not just life partners, but we worked together. We had clients in common. I mean, so it was sort of this slow process. I needed to keep my shit together for my clients and everybody else.
I was wondering, how do you go to work?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you sit, hold space, and provide the wisdom and caring and just connection that your clients need when you're just torn up inside?
So raw. Yeah. And so the very first friend of mine that I shared was very kind and receptive and said, well, you can't really share this with people. And so I basically tried to hold it together for the first month. And that was probably the worst.
You mean not share it with clients?
Yeah, not share it with clients. And that was probably the worst month. And eventually I recognized that that's just not how I work. I am so genuine and I teach from my life and my life experience and my stories. And I just felt like I couldn't really be real. Mm-hmm. And so, I had a conversation with him and I said, we need to tell our clients and we need to tell people. And so we started sitting down with each one of our clients and telling them and having conversations. And that was a huge relief because then it allowed me to just, just excel and just be real.
Yeah. Which is what you want your people to do.
Right?
Don't put on a happy face and pretend that your heart isn't ripped apart.
Yeah. And that was actually so great because all of my clients were amazing. I think I only cried with one client. I pretty much was able to hold it together. And it was just one client because there was something about people usually would ask me, how are you doing? And so it was really sweet because I felt the caring from my clients without really allowing them to caretake for me. I was like, I'm doing what I need to do. And I have the support that I need. But there was one, and I don't know if it was the timing or whatever, how they asked. And I just kind of teared up and I was like, I'm so sorry. And they were so understanding and so great, so that was a huge, huge relief. Sharing with my couples was the most anxiety producing when I started sharing with clients because all of a sudden I had all this doubt about what's going to happen. Are they just going to fire me on the spot? Are they going to trust me? I had a whole conversation with a good friend of mine and I was really worried about also ethically, should I even keep working with them? Is it even ethical for me to keep working with couples when I am going through this process and I'm freaking out, I'm falling apart. And I really loved her response. It was so beautiful because she said to me, Elena, you're a master therapist. I am not even worried a little bit about your skill. I know that you will continue to do the work that you need to do and you'll do it brilliantly. I'm more worried about you. And whether you continuing to work with them, it's going to be more painful as you're going through this process. And so I felt like there's a whole other layer of processing for me and even trying to decide about, when to share, how to share, and whether I was choosing to continue to work with them or not work with them or, that kind of thing. And having all of this doubt and shame about, here I am supporting them in maintaining and building good relationships. And my relationship is, gone down the right drain, So, so there's so much complexity when it came to that place. And I was pleasantly surprised by all of my couples pretty much were so empathetic towards me. They never really questioned. They never really questioned me. And I also was able to be very real with them, I had a session with a couple that came in one day that was like just being awful at each other. And I did something that I probably wouldn't have done before, that I was like so much more passionate, let's put it that way, about intervening, and I said to them, if you actually want to be together and form, and maintain your relationship, you need to stop doing this. And, and I was able to share really genuinely about and I can tell you, going through this process, it's not an easy process and it's painful. And so you really need to think twice, and we had a really great relationship and we're going through this process pretty, we're still good friends. We're talking through. So you really need to be thinking about what it is that you are saying and how you are treating this person that you have chosen as your life partner. And they were both a little bit shocked, because
is this the same psychologist?
Yeah, it was a little bit more
Did she get body snatched?
It was a little bit like a, emotional shakedown. But I felt like I actually became a lot more passionate and a lot more committed to helping couples look at their patterns and work through those things and learn to communicate better because I could share the pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were the driver's safety instructor who crashed the car off the highway.
Totally.
Telling kids, don't die.
Totally.
Don't die. Don't drive off the road.
And that was totally unexpected, right? That was not what I was. But that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it was really when he left that I felt that huge, I really felt like my floor bottomed out because of all the things that he took care of were very, he grocery shopped, he cooked, he did a lot of things that took care of me in a way that were very practical that I wasn't used to. And then all of a sudden I'm faced with, I need to figure out how to grocery shop and cook and still keep my business and clients and all of these things that seemed so silly. And I felt kind of ashamed because I felt like these are simple things that most people do on a regular basis, right? And here I am struggling.
And on top of that, at that point that part of the path of healing is connecting with others, but you're just trying to figure out how to keep your life together and your business.
Yeah. Having been a performer helped, right? Because the show must go on. And so you learn how to be in performance mode. And because I had gone through several other things, I had learned, okay, I fall apart when I leave work. I fall apart on the weekends. And then I pull myself together. And then I show up in the way that I need to show up for work and for my clients. I come from this philosophy that life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you and through you, and that you are a co-creator, either at a super conscious, unconscious, or conscious level of all the things that you're experiencing, and that all of that is in service of your higher growth and your spiritual growth. So connection with others was a mixed bag. So beginning to tell actually friends and family was a whole other journey. Obviously family was challenging. Both of our families loved both of us and there was so much grief there. But what was surprising was telling many of our friends and then having the reactions that they had, because many of them just started crying and were shocked. I had a few of them start crying because they said, your relationship was the model by which I was aspiring to. And I want, we were working to get our relationship to be as good as your guys' relationship. So it felt like in us making this decision, we were shattering like other people's models of what they viewed as a good relationship. And then I felt like the need to try to comfort them.
To take care of them.
Right? And to take care of them. And so then all of a sudden, it felt incredibly burdensome to actually share, because then it was like, I am barely holding it together. And now I have to take care of even more people that are not even paying me, I also had friends that were, said all the right things, like, I'm sorry you're going through this, I'll be here for you. Let me know, and then I never heard from them. They just sort of vanished. And then I had some amazing angels that just showed up, and I can count them with one hand. I think that one of the things that I learned through this is that in general, we're not very good at sitting with pain and grief, and we just don't know how to deal with it. And so I kind of learned like how much to share, what to share, how to, and what I appreciated about the people that were showing up for me is that some of them were great at just holding space and just allowing me to be. Some of them were great at just like being with me and reminding me of who I am just as a human being, My father, who, over the years we've had a very challenging relationship, and we had worked, very hard at creating a better relationship. He showed up in a really sweet and a really big way, even though he is very uncomfortable with negative emotion and he doesn't really know what to say. And, he was the one that, like, when I first happened, I was crying. He picked up the phone and he's like, okay, I'll get your mom. Right? Like, he just cannot. But what he did was something that was so beautiful, in that he actually texted me every single day. And every day he would text me and he'd just be like, how are you? Or I'm thinking about you, or I love you. Or he would send me a picture. He would send me pictures of purple trees and purple flowers, because, purple's my favorite color. So it was just these little tiny, random things that just were letting me know that he was thinking about me. And that made such a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any things you noticed in the people who were there for you, like any commonalities. Like, one thing I was wondering, I could imagine that friends or colleagues of yours who've been divorced, because I think if you haven't walked certain coals, it's hard to know. And my guess, people who've been through divorce know that a divorce is an amputation. It's brutal. But I don't know if you noticed any commonalities
it's
there.
fascinating, because I cannot draw any generalizations. I found that some people that had gone through divorce actually were really challenging, because they were just projecting their own experience onto my experience. And so they had a lot of anger, and they were like, well, aren't you angry? And I didn't have any anger, And so I was constantly confronted by people telling me or, questioning me about being angry. And I never once was angry. That was not something that I was feeling. And so it was challenging, because then all of a sudden I was trying to, so I had to separate myself from the people that were not allowing me to have the experience that I had intended to have through this process, right? I made a choice that we were going to have a very conscious, kind, loving separation, divorce process. And And people were kind of baffled about that. And so
actually it's the opposite of what I said. Your experience that a lot of people who are been through a divorce, it was so hard rock emotional, that they were it must have been like my divorce. So you weren't allowed to have your experience.
But I did have a couple friends that had been divorced that were great. Right? So then this is why I said I cannot make any generalizations, because I had some that had been, and they were awesome. And they were some of the best people at holding space and just crying with me and just allowing me to be. And the same thing I can say for married friends, right? Like I had some married friends that I felt like I had leprosy, that I kind of felt like they were scared that they were going to catch the disease or something, like it felt that way for me at least. And then I had some married friends that were just so there for me. And, so it's really, so I cannot say that it was like, married or divorced or single. I literally had friends that were single, married, and divorced be part of my angels.
Yeah.
And then I had people that were, from those categories just respond differently. So I felt like it was more about just their ability to be empathic and be willing to sit through the pain and or to remind me of me.
I'm sure something that you deal with a lot in your work and I do in my work is when people are going through something awful, how do they explain or make sense of the people who don't show up? And again, that happened to you. That's happened to me. I think it happens to everybody. You go through something really hard. People are going to show up who surprise you, and some people who don't show up will shock you. And how did you work through that? Okay, again, because I think you're going, when you've been through some really hard, this was your fourth, arguably really awful thing. You're a psychologist, so you are a professional at helping people, create and kind of co-write stories that are stories of healing and learning and resilience. And then you're put in that position where people you thought would be there for you weren't.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you couching it that way, because I do feel like having all of that experience and training and philosophy was a huge source of resilience. And that for me, I saw this as my firewalk, so to speak, an opportunity for me to live what I teach. Part of that is that how you create stories and how you make meaning, right? Is that you don't take a victim stance, right? So for me, I was always very aware of the story that I make now, the story that I tell other people, it's what's going to become the truth and my truth. And so I need to be super careful about what are the stories that I'm making about him, about my friends that are not showing up, all of that. And so for me, I sort of just went to the place of the people that are showing up for me are the people that are meant to show up for me. And the people that aren't are to, like, life is not slowing down for them. Like, I want life to slow down, like this is a major thing that's happening in my life, but it's not happening in their life. They're still managing their own struggles. They're still managing their busy life, their kids, whatever it's going on. And so I cannot expect people to drop their life to come take care of me or rescue me, or you know what I mean? Which is not really what I wanted anyway, but and so in some ways I felt like, well, like they're doing their thing. And so I need to, and in some ways I think that this has also been a theme for me. I've lost many friends through the process. And so one of the lessons that I felt early on that this process was really about me learning to stand on my own 2 feet. And so there was a piece of not having that many people show up either that to me felt like this is really about me learning to show up for me in a bigger way that I have done before and becoming very good at it.
Yeah, sounds like you worked hard to create that story that you can hold in your heart of why people didn't show up. And people struggle with that. I see my patients struggling with that so much. And, so often they default to a story of resentment, abandonment.
Yep.
I thought they cared about me. And what I try to help people see is like, hey, people are so wrapped up in their lives. Or one thing I think that happens a lot is people are, as you said a few minutes ago, a lot of people do not know how to sit with pain, and they don't realize that all they need to do is listen. They think, I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to address that. There's nothing I could do that's going to make that better. Mm-hmm. So I'll just stay away from it.
Yeah, 100%. That's so true, right? Like they want to can't do the tissue right away. And, and I think that me being a therapist and being able to kind of sense people was very easy to be like, okay, they're uncomfortable. And it's part of the reason why I shared the story of my dad, because I think that even for somebody that just didn't feel and has never felt really comfortable in dealing with emotions, that he showed up in the way that he could. And that was super powerful and meaningful, And so I often sat and was like, I wonder if people could recognize that just sending a quick text would mean the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that people in their minds are thinking what can I do that it's actually going to make a difference?
Right. Or I could see thinking, oh, if I sent Elena a text, that's so lame. I should do something bigger or better than that. That's really pathetic. Yeah. So instead of doing something small, they do nothing, which again, I love that story about your dad, that's A+ fathering for him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he just
for sure.
Right. Just to send out a little something, a little balloon every day. Hey,
yeah,
I love you.
Yeah. That was huge. I made a very important commitment to my self-care. Early on, a friend of mine asked me, do you think that you might relapse? And she was referring to my eating disorder that I had many, many years ago. And my answer was immediate, and it was absolutely not. And I made a commitment that through the process, I was A, not going to touch a drop of alcohol, B, that I was going to make sure that I ate 3 full meals, even if I wasn't hungry, and that I was going to do physical activity that was meaningful to me. So I went back to dance, and I, made time to go to dance and do aerial dance and go hiking. And
can you isolate 2 or 3 of the key elements for you of healing from this 4th and most recent dark night of the soul?
Yeah. Self-reflection. So my meditation, I'm a huge meditator. I have a meditation practice I have had consistently for 6 years now. And so my meditation increased. I usually meditate for about 20 minutes each morning. I think I was meditating about an hour each morning before going to work and anything else. And then again at night. And taking time. So it's interesting because you asked about connection, and I believe that the friendships and the connection were a great distraction. And they were really great in reminding me that I am loved. I think it's so important, as a support person, like how you show up with people that is not from a place of pity, because you already feel broken, right? And so you really need friends that can remind you of your strength and what they see in you, so that you remember that and that you can live into that. And that was really important. Writing and moving and doing art and meditation, mm-hmm. Those were kind of like the biggest pieces for me. And there were a lot of solo work. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that there's also a piece that is an intersection with temperament. I am an introvert. And as we know, introverts, when they are struggle, they go inward, and I need to process internally before anything comes out. And I felt like that was really important and really needed for me. Mm-hmm. And this is a question that you asked me when we were just barely chatting about, and and I'm going to bring it up, about why I did so many things that seem solo versus, connecting more with people. And so there is a piece, so a higher order piece in terms of recognizing that we delude ourselves into believing that we can control or have certainty about relationships or other people. There's this saying of some people come into your lives for a reason, for a season, or a lifetime. And I often quote it to my clients, and I think that we often try to make people lifetime people. And most people are reason or season people. And if we can honor that most people are reason or season people, and that it's not a reason not to invest, right? But that in the end, the closest and most significant relationship that you will have is with yourself, right? That then doing any kind of solo practice builds a sense of ownership and control and predictability that when the rug is pulled from underneath you, you really want and crave. And so my meditation practice were like bookends, really providing a lot of grounding and a lot of spiritual support and stillness in allowing me to feel like I'm here for me. And then I can be here for others.
Yeah. I like that season versus lifetime. It reminds me, I think it's an Esther Perel quotation that most of us will have 2 or 3 marriages in our lifetime, and it may or may not be the same person. Given this idea that even if you stay with the same partner, there's going to be these huge tectonic shifts where actually it's like a different marriage.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And it has to do also with our own personal growth, right? Because, so this comes from Conversations with God, Neil Walsh, or he talks about how we often come into relationships without being very conscious. And we come into relationships because we see something in this other person and we want that. Or we think that that person is going to heal something. And he talks about how we tell each other that we love you, I love you. And he said, we should say, I trade you. But that in the end, really, the true conscious relationship will come from each of us learning to love ourselves fully, to be fully realized individual people, and then to be willing to come together to journey together, and learn from each other through that process, rather than feeling like this person is going to be your all, or save you or heal you or whatever.
And what about Elena? I'm wondering, turning the tables, having been through this, and the people that you love and care about, they're going to go through awful stuff. And you have this powerful insight. You've lived this. But I've experienced it as being kind of overwhelming that, at work, I care for a whole bunch of people. And then in my life, I care for a bunch of people. But sometimes I think so many people are hurting so much. And sometimes I just get so overwhelmed. Like, should I text so-and-so? Should I call so-and-so? Should I be reaching out to so-and-so? Because I know what it's like to suffer alone. And so it can feel so overwhelming, because I know there's so many people out there that I care about that might be thinking, hey, Craig's not checked in with me. Does he not care? And no, it's not. It's not so many balls in the air.
Yeah, and it's difficult because, I often feel like I have many children. And, and then I recognize that for them, I'm just the one person, and I actually had a conversation with a client about this, and And it made me question this a little bit about I care so deeply for each one of my clients, and I try to go the extra mile, and sometimes I am able to, and other times I am not. And I think that me sharing what was going on in my life was a part of establishing some of that self-care, of letting them know, like, I am gonna show up 100% for you when we see each other. And I also am needing to have space to move through the things that I need to move through.
Yeah.
And so I may not be able to respond to you. And I tell my clients from the beginning, I say, if you text me and I'm available, I will reply. But I may not reply for many hours. I may not reply for a day. Mm-hmm. And it's not because I don't care. It's because most likely I am, serving other people, or I'm not in a place where I am actually can show up for you.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I was wondering when I asked you about the factors that helped you heal, I was also imagining your clients, because a few minutes ago you talked about opening up to them and realizing, they probably felt grateful. They actually wanted to not just support you, but sort of adjust their expectations a little bit, because you're right, you are their everything, so many of them. And it's just a little bit of a reality check that you're a real person too. And you're saying, hey, I'll take care of you, but just so you know, there's some real stuff going on.
Yeah. And I felt like that was an important piece, because in a strange way, I actually kind of felt that from some of my clients and even some of my friends, in social media, that were a little bit, nobody said this, So again, this is just my own story that I was making up in my head, like just a feeling that they were like, well, you can say those things because your life is charmed. Like, yeah, you can say that life happens for you and through you, and that you're like responsible for co-creating blah, 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 because your life is great and you have it all together and, you're happy and everything's good. It's easy for you to say that. And so for me to be able to be willing to be honest and transparent was really about saying, like, I am human too. I'm not immune. Like, shit happens, and real shit happens. The fact that I'm not constantly talking about all the bad stuff, it's because I don't want to continue to recreate and recycle those stories. And so I'm focusing on what it is that I need to learn, and how to, what's the lesson that I need to get from this, and how can I overcome it. So I think that the biggest takeaway I want to leave people with is that regardless of what happens, that completely tears you up and tears your life or your heart apart, or where you literally feel like you cannot envision you coming back from that thing, that's probably the most important and the biggest thing that's going to teach you and give you so much, that if we're willing to actually surrender to the process, because I think that this is part of why we struggle. I was able to really understand at a experiential level that quote of pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It's a very common Buddhist, teaching. And I think for a long time I was like, I don't know what that really means. And I feel like I was able to really understand that, there's going to be all kinds of life circumstances that are going to be painful. And that how we choose to go through the experience is what's going to create more suffering or create more healing. And so that the more that we resist the experience, the more pain we have, the more suffering we have. And the more that we're able to get into a place of surrender and recognize that, okay, when he said, I think it's a successful completion of a spiritual contract, I was like, the hell it is,
That is the biggest re-scripting ever.
Right. But I totally actually believe that because of what I have experienced, how I have experienced myself grow. And I have grown in ways and done things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And so I feel like sometimes the thing that feels the most painful is the thing that is actually going to liberate you and help you emerge in a new way as a new person and help you become who you are meant to become and teach you the lessons that you are meant to teach. And so to me it's almost like being able to lean into and I have a lot of gratitude for the entire process because, and this is not my quote, this I read somewhere, but I really resonated with it, that we came here to experience, and that whenever we experience severe pain, we're actually touching the edges of life. And I really love that. And so anytime that I was doing ugly crying and I'm just like feeling like totally miserable, I'll remind myself, I'm touching the edges of life. I'm touching one of the edges, which means that there's other edges that I could touch, and to wrap it up in terms of relationships, that in some ways relationships are the playground in which we get to both experience ourselves as who we are, and we get to learn our greatest lessons, which is why we need to continue to be open and vulnerable and willing to engage in relationships, no matter how many times your heart has been broken.
I learned some important things from Elena through her story. That the deeper the interpersonal wound, the more crucial that healing includes some type of personal growth work, a shoring up of the self's resilience, an increased sense of safety and completeness, even in the absence of others. Elena reminded me that not only are life's biggest tests often the most totally unexpected, but that the fact of this actually can free us from needless worry, because we really have no idea what's coming. And isn't that such a deep relief? I've spoken before on the show about how I used to spend endless hours worrying about who would be my next suicide. And then, finally, when I came to realize that there was no rhyme or reason to the patients I lost, no meaningful patterns at all, this realization actually freed me from the agonizing cycle of endless dread. And finally, Elena reminded me that a core psychological task for all of us is to learn how to separate the pain from the suffering. Suffering is fueled by the conscious or unconscious story that we're all telling ourselves about the why behind the pain. But by crafting a story of learning and growth that we can hold both in our heads and our hearts, we can greatly dial down the suffering and start to move forward with some peace and even with some gratitude toward the next inevitable dark night of the soul.